technical difficulties, but there's a lot going on, so we're going to jump right into it. I'm your host, Kim Becker, alongside Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd and Locked On Celtics host John Karalis. We will start with the James Harden and Ben Simmons trading places. Josh, let's start with you.
Yeah, obviously it's huge. It's the thing we were all waiting for to see whether it was going to go down. It did go down. I think it's got to be a win for both teams, really, because obviously Simmons wasn't playing and you're replacing Seth Curry with James Harden. So it's a big upgrade for Philadelphia there. Harden, obviously, Hart wasn't in it at the end here in Brooklyn. Simmons changes their whole dynamic. I'm still very interested to see how it all plays out for them, just because it's such a big difference to have a guy like Harden. And Simmons is going to handle the ball at a similar amount, but the player and the difference and the change in the offense and the change in their defense is going to be really intriguing to watch how that all breaks down, I guess, over the next coming couple of weeks.
John, what was your reaction?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a win-win for both sides. When you consider from the Philly perspective, they didn't have Simmons, and Andre Drummond is just, I'm not a big fan. Let's just say that. So to me, it's essentially trading Seth Curry for James Harden, and you throw in a couple of picks there, and that's obviously a major upgrade. And if Harden didn't want to be in Brooklyn, then Harden wasn't going to be James Harden. That we've seen that when Harden is not engaged, and he does have, it's a little bit of a flight of fancy with him. He if he's not happy somewhere, he shuts down or does not play up to his normal potential. So now, whatever it was that irked him in Brooklyn, he's now in Philly. He's with Daryl Morey again, and theoretically, he and Joel Embiid can work well together. I think Joel Embiid, this is a huge win for him because he's having an MVP caliber season, and there was a real risk of Philly going past this deadline and asking him to do a ton. We know that his health is not always the best, and he would tend to wear down. So to have another guy here in Harden to help shoulder the load, it's going to be huge for the Sixers. And on that Brooklyn side, obviously you now have an elite defender in Ben Simmons that you can throw at a Giannis, that you can throw at the other team's best perimeter player. You throw it at Jason Tatum in a playoff series, and that obviously improves a very tough defense, a suspect defense, I should say, in Brooklyn. And we'll see how he fits offensively. I think one thing to watch for in New York is the easing as COVID starts to subside. The Omicron variant starts to subside. If New York City eases their restrictions, do you have Kyrie Irving back as a full-time player? And if you get that, now you have a full complement offensively, and we can see how they might fit him in. So this is a win-win to me for both sides.
All right. Well, we have Doug Norrie, the host of Locked On Nets, here to weigh in and give us his opinions on this one. Doug, welcome in. What did you think of this move?
Yeah, not surprised. By the time it had all been fleshed out through different media sources, I think most Nets folks could see it coming that this was going to happen. It had entered basically a when, not if stage. So it really wasn't surprising to see it happen. I think once you do some mental gymnastics around, the fit and stuff and like where the different situations are, both from the Simmons and Harden side, I think both sides can talk themselves into it. The Nets fans for sure, and Nets folks for sure can. So I think at this point, you start envisioning how it's going to kind of lay out for Brooklyn. And it was probably by the end something that basically just needed to happen, especially where you considered how some of the narrative had gone around Harden specifically in Brooklyn, because it was just kind of turning into a mess.
Let me hop in here, Doug. I just mentioned the potential fit here offensively. How do you see Simmons, if you have everybody back, let's assume by the playoffs, maybe you have Kyrie Irving back. How do you see Simmons fitting in?
Oh yeah, so he's totally different than Harden. So you can't just swap him into the Harden role 1-to-1 because they couldn't be any more different on the basketball court. So I think like that part of it, you have to move into a different direction with how the Nets offense is going to run. The good news is that when you have Kevin Durant on your team, and I would say to some degree Kyrie Irving too on offense, they're so dynamic and versatile that you can slot a different kinds of guys into the offense and have it work. You'll probably see Simmons wanting to push the pace a lot with transition. The Nets can be very, very good from that perspective, and that will probably almost overnight change their pace of play, as opposed to having Harden taking, what felt like 18 seconds to get the ball up the court sometimes. And then on offense, you'll probably see him slot more into like this screener, short roll kind of guy who can help with where the spacing already is by adding a guy like Seth Curry. That really, really helps, especially in the short term for shooting. And the Nets have already employed this kind of offense before through guys like Bruce Brown, through guys like DeAndre Bembry, where if they can catch the ball in the short roll and make quick reads, the Nets at a full strength team, especially if you get Joe Harris back, which is feeling like a big if at this point. With that kind of spacing, Simmons can really, really thrive in that, I think. And so while it's not going to be a James Harden centric offense, like it kind of had been, you can really start picturing how the pieces fit, because essentially the thing that Simmons does the most poorly, which is shoot, should be covered by basically everybody else on the team. And at that point, with spacing around him, we've seen him be a very dynamic offensive player through his creativity. So I there's a lot of ways I can kind of see it working. It's just going to look very different than what they had with James Harden, which when it was firing all cylinders was great. And that had kind of stopped right now because of some circumstances beyond Harden's control.
All right. Well, Doug, we appreciate your time. We've got a lot to get you here, but thanks for weighing in. Thanks for joining us on that one. I hope that you have a good rest of the day. Hopefully you can get some rest after that one, but I'm sure that you've still got some stuff going on. But Prize Picks here, you guys. Prize Picks is a daily fantasy made easy. Play NBA daily fantasy at prizepicks.com. Okay, Josh, we got a lot of questions in that chat. So let's pick some of those and let's address them, because I know that they want to hear from you.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. Thanks everyone for waiting patiently as everything has been going on here as we're trying to get this show going. I know you guys got tons of questions about things happening. Well, let's start with this initial trade and let people asking about what's going on with the center position in Brooklyn for fantasy. I don't really think that it's going to be, hey, let's just give 30 minutes to Andre Drummond. I don't see why any team would want to do that. I think it's going to be just still a mess with Aldridge and Claxton and Drummond sort of sharing those minutes, and I wouldn't be. Yeah, an Andre Drummond, Ben Simmons offensive pairing doesn't really scream a huge amount of efficiency to me. So I can't see them. Just Drummond's not playing I don't think he's playing a significantly larger role than he did in Philadelphia. Do you see that, John?
No, not at all. I mean, why would he? So
yeah, exactly.
We're talking about no, just throw that one out. Like. I think from you're looking from a fantasy perspective. Look, I'm not an Andre Drummond fan, so I think Andre Drummond is.
He's not very good.
Thank you. That's a succinct way to put what I was about to say.
We'll just say it. What are we waiting for here?
He's not very good. So throw him out, and then Ben Simmons has the potential to be, I don't know what kind of scoring numbers he's going to put up, but I think there is some question about the fit and his willingness to be that dunker spot kind of guy in the half court offense. The Nets aren't going to be a very high pace team. They have a tendency to walk it up, with Kevin Durant and everything. So having Simmons in that half court, in that dunker spot, is he going to be happy there? How are they going to play? Doug mentioned that, when you put shooters around him, he could really, it's going to be interesting to see if you want to pick and roll, how they play that. And will he get some alley-oops? Will he basically be like a lob threat kind of center? So I still think the value of him, from a fantasy perspective, is going to be very interesting. I see Josh with jaw dropping.
Too. A trade alert, people. The Washington Wizards and the Dallas Mavericks here, Josh. You're going to give us the deets of this one.
Well, this is the details we know at the moment. The Wizards are sending Spencer Dinwiddie to Dallas for Kristaps Porzingis, which is just, I don't know. It's just wild on so many different aspects. There's more to come, obviously, from a Washington perspective, I'm guessing. But this is a package centered on Spencer Dinwiddie, centered around Spencer Dinwiddie. So I don't actually know what to make of this until we get more coming. But we sort of expected Dinwiddie to move. I did not expect Porzingis to be going back in the other direction. That is a wild one, John.
Porzingis moving is a wild one. We just saw Montrezl Harrell get moved to Charlotte. So they are redoing their center position there. Redoing it around Porzingis and so it's Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans, according to Tim McMahon of ESPN. Well, look, for Dallas, they needed a point guard, so you get that. And Bertans is a shooter, so you're adding a stretch. You kind of like the piece of Porzingis that you kind of wanted, that sliver. If you slice that off, it becomes Davis Bertans. So you get that. So for the Mavs, I can see it. You turn a guy that was kind of a suspect fit into two players that fit a need. So I can see that. Contractually, it seems like it's it's bad money for bad money. I don't know what the Wizards are trying to do. I'm wondering if this is part of a bigger plan, because obviously everything around the Wizards is centered around Bradley Beal and keeping Bradley Beal.
Well, for the Mavs, let's see if go ahead, Josh. Then we've got our Locked On Mavs host that's going to join us. But Josh, go ahead first.
What I was going to say is I'm not sure what Dallas is thinking. They've already got Brunson and Doncic who they're running in the starting lineup to handle the ball. Like, do they need another ball handler? What's their big man? Are they just going to go small all the time? Here is Maxi Kleber, full-time center. I don't know. There's a lot. It feels like there's maybe something extra coming with this, because it doesn't feel. I know Porzingis is a weird fit with Doncic, but the acquisition of Dinwiddie doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense at this point. But hey, maybe Nick's got more insight on that.
I was just going to say, maybe Nick can help us with that one. Nick Angstad, our Locked On Mavs host, is here and ready. Nick, what is happening? Were you expecting this? This is a very initial thought right now.
Guys,
I love that. We're going to get your reaction.
The Dallas Mavericks made a huge trade. They sent Kristaps Porzingis for Spencer Dinwiddie, Davis Bertans. This is a deal we thought that they possibly could do. The Mavs are looking for another ball handler, Josh. They are looking for another guy that can handle the ball, because they've been playing Luka and Brunson a lot together. And when those guys, when you have one of them out of the lineup, or when you have, to sit both of them for whatever reason, the other night, the Mavs had, Luka and Brunson with 5 fouls in the third quarter. Like, what do you do in those situations? You just turn to Trey Burke? Or what happens if one of those guys goes down for any reason? Luka gets, ejected because he is really close to the technical threshold. Like, there's just so many reasons why this team needed another guy to handle the ball. And Kristaps Porzingis, I think this has been in the works for a long time. At the end of last season, Kristaps Porzingis almost all but asked for a trade from the Dallas Mavericks. And I think they've just been biding their time and waiting for the point where, all right, we're going to find a team. Up your value, be a good soldier, hang out for a little bit, maybe, get a couple more post-ups. Jason Kidd will try to do his little player coach magic and try and figure out if we can up your value a little bit here. They've been holding him out for about a week now for, bone bruise, random knee injury, random knee soreness that they've been talking about, trying to just keep him healthy, I think. And they finally found a suitor for him here.
Yeah, look, the whole Porzingis thing has been kind of a, like you said, a thing in the process. But getting Bertans back, where does this put the Mavs as far as like future moves? It feels like each one of these moves takes away from the potential to like fix the team later. Like, okay, now you've got Dinwiddie and Bertans, so you're going to be. It's not like you can make a ton of moves to improve this team greater. Like, I feel like you're starting to head towards. Not quite, but like starting to head towards Lakers territory. Like, how many more assets do you really have now to
Josh, heading towards Lakers territory? Coming from the Celtics host, I take that as a big compliment. I think
I'm not saying you're there. I'm just saying you took a left down that street.
No, I think you take the big contract of Porzingis that was, a lot of people said was semi-untradeable, right? He can't stay on the floor. Not sure what his fit is. Last year defensively, he was horrible. This year, he's been much better. But now you take that asset, you split it into two, right? I think you split it into two. You get off of Dinwiddie's money a year earlier. Davis Bertans is making half of what Kristaps Porzingis is. And so I think it makes them more flexible. Then in this offseason, around the draft, they're allowed to trade their draft pick this year. And then the more time goes on, they're allowed to trade future draft picks. And so I think they take this package and they package it in the offseason around the draft, or even, right after that, for something bigger later. So I think it makes them, to use a football term, it makes them more multiple, right? Like, it makes them be able to do a couple different deals instead of we can only trade Porzingis for a massive other salary.
Nick, do you think that this, obviously with Bradley Beal having the surgery to end his season, is this any indication that the Wizards are looking at Porzingis at maybe not playing the rest of the year, that this knee bone bruise is actually something a little bit more significant, and they're just going to say, well, you and Brad just sit over there, you can watch the games from the sideline, and we'll see you guys back here next year?
which sounds very similar to when the Mavericks traded for Kristaps Porzingis and they just let him like stay out for a while and just let him sit and hang out until they got to next season. Man, asking a question about Kristaps Porzingis and injuries is, I'm so glad I'm done answering those questions now that he's not on the team anymore, because it just was, he would play 8 games and then he would sit out 5 games for something random, for something else, for something here. So if you're asking a question about Porzingis injury, my answer is yes, right? It just seems like every time you turn the corner, something else happens with him. And it stinks for him because this year he had been playing really well. He had been, playing defense at the best I've seen since he was in New York. His offense had been, to a level, he wasn't hitting threes, but he was hitting his, post-up shots, and he was getting some rhythm here and there, and he just could not stay on the court long enough to, get enough of a run going to where he would, make a huge impact.
All right, Nick. Well, we appreciate you jumping in on that one. I know that you kind of had to really be on your toes and get ready to jump in here, but that's what we like.
Always.
We like those initial reactions, I mean, we appreciate it. All right, he is out, and we are going to talk about the Kings. But first, if you're hiring, you need Indeed. Go to Indeed.com/locked to learn more. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Go to Indeed.com/locked to learn more. Before we turn to the Kings conversation, though, let's take a couple more questions from the chat. I know that they want to hear from us, and we love interacting. So, Josh, I'm sure there's a couple more questions in there that you could probably address for us.
Yeah, there's millions of them. A lot of questions about, I guess, this most recent trade. Let me just hit on a couple of things. I don't think this really helps Spencer Dinwiddie's fantasy value, if anyone's considering that. Like, the value is up with Beal injured. I think it's pretty much down now, so I don't think you need to worry about him. Maybe Maxi Kleber becomes an ad, but he's a little bit too up and down. I honestly don't think that Porzingis is going to be playing a huge role here after the deadline. I think it's going to be still fairly minimal. I do think that the worry with the knee is an issue here, and I don't think the Wizards are like, hey, we need Porzingis, and that's pushing us into the playoffs after they've just shut Beal down. I think this is a play for future seasons. So that's how I'm sort of viewing that one. I'm not like looking at Porzingis is coming in and is going to kill the value of those other big men in Washington. I'm just not certain of how much he's going to play down the stretch here, which is obviously a pretty significant worry for people who have him on their fantasy teams. One other thing that I've seen people asking a lot, we haven't actually talked about this trade, but I'm going to hit this question now because I know people have been asking about it. Jalen Smith heading to Indiana. It's not a big trade in the NBA landscape, but he's got a real opportunity to take on that starting role that Torrey Craig had, and he can put up numbers. We saw that in Phoenix already. It's not shifting anything really across the league, but that is something that fantasy managers, I reckon, are going to have to pay some attention to, is Jalen Smith heading to Indiana.
I like that move, actually. That was a nice little ancillary move, just to throw my 2 cents in there. The Suns have Ayton back, and with JaVale McGee and Bismack Biyombo kind of giving decent backup minutes, there were no minutes for Jalen Smith. For him to go to Indy, it's a nice little move for Indy to pick up a future piece. And yeah, I think he's going to get a lot of run, and he's played well when he's gotten a lot of run. So I think that's a nice pickup there. And, for the Suns, they get a versatile wing guy that can maybe help more immediately. So I think that's a nice trade. And like you said, I think for the Pacers, that's a good value.
All right, well, we can stay on the Indy topic here and talk about the Kings-Pacers trade that happened a couple of days ago. The Indiana Pacers traded Domantas Sabonis, Jeremy Lamb, Justin Holiday, and a protected 2023 second-round pick to the Sacramento Kings for Tyrese Haliburton, Buddy Hield, and Tristan Thompson. Josh, what were your initial thoughts about this one?
I talked about this on my show quite a bit. I didn't love it from a value perspective for Sacramento. They obviously get the better player at the moment in Sabonis, who is a better option. But in terms of future value and valuing where the team sits currently, I didn't really understand the move. I know Kings fans are super hyped after what they saw yesterday in Sabonis' first game there, but it still doesn't change my long-term opinion that they probably made the wrong move there. And then making further moves today with Sacramento, getting some other players there with Dante DiVincenzo, which is actually a move that I do like from them. Getting him in there for the low cost of trading away Marvin Bagley. So that's how it happens in trades. You make some ones that are good, and you make some ones that are maybe not so good.
Yeah, the Kings definitely staying in that conversation today as well. John, what were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think for the Kings, this was a matter of finances. They just the combination of De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield, it was just not going to work, and they needed to get off one of those guys. And the price of getting off one of those guys was Tyrese Haliburton, and that was just how it was going to go. And if they wanted to keep Fox and build around Fox, then I think this was a move they felt they had to make. I didn't like it. I didn't like giving up a piece in Haliburton that I thought could be a foundational, not a superstar, but a foundational type of piece. But on the flip side, from the Sacramento perspective, you did get an all-star for that, a contract that you didn't want anymore, and a very overpriced player in Hield, who has a very specific skill set and did not do much else, so he's very overpaid. You gave up Haliburton, who, if you want to rationalize it from the Kings' perspective, is a good player. He's a starter in the NBA, but is he ever going to be an all-NBA player? Probably not. So you get an all-star in exchange for them. And I think one thing that we do here, and a lot of us do when we're watching, from the outside, we all see this in terms of the goal is a championship. And I certainly do that as a big market guy. Goal is a championship. Every move has to build towards, are you going to be a contender? Sacramento Kings haven't made the playoffs in forever. And there's value in Sacramento for not being the joke of the league, for being a competent team and putting together a decent roster that can win some games. You can feel good about the team that you're cheering for, and that the team can actually make the playoffs, and the owners can get some, they want to see some return on their investment from some playoff gates. So I think the mentality in Sacramento is just a little different than it is when I'm analyzing it for other teams. So yeah, the cost, not what I would give up. I wouldn't give up Haliburton in a deal like that, but for the Kings, the moves that they're making win now moves to put a decent team together. And I think they're going to be happy in Sacramento having a decent team after all these years of not having one.
Well, we've got Matt George from Locked on Kings, and he's going to weigh in here and let us know if he agrees with you. Matt, welcome in. I know it's been a tough few years for the Kings, but are you excited for the future after what's going on here?
A tough few years, Kim. It's been a tough decade and a half. What are you talking about? Few years.
I was trying to be nice, okay?
I appreciate it, Kim. I really do. Honestly, I'm both surprised by the overall national opinion that tends to agree with what Josh was saying. But I also am not at the same time, which is a horrible take to have. But look, the initial reaction was, what in the world are the Kings doing trading Tyrese Haliburton? And the initial emotional reaction was, that was the last guy I expected for the Kings to move on from. They better have gotten something good for it. That has to work right away. If the Kings are trading away Tyrese Haliburton, they have to be better immediately. And lo and behold, from what we saw last night, granted it was against the Timberwolves, but lo and behold, the Kings looked significantly better. They also looked like they still don't know how to play defense, which hasn't been anything new for this Kings team in a while. But all things considered, the Kings got better. And the Kings turned a player who has star potential in Tyrese, who was absolutely a fan favorite, and I understand why so many people like what he brings. They turned that into a multi-time all-star, and more importantly, they gave De'Aaron Fox an all-star to play with that he has not had at any point in his career. There were thoughts and hopes that Fox and Haliburton could work together. I still believe it could have worked, but from what we saw this season and bits and pieces of last season, the transition wasn't as seamless as maybe a one-game sample size of what we saw with Fox and Domantas Sabonis last night. So the only, I guess, major issue that I had, other than having to give up Haliburton in the deal, is that I think the Kings may have waited a little too long to make a move like this, even though they're still in the running for the play-in. It's going to take a lot for them to get into the play-in and then through that to the playoffs, which is what you make this move for. Plus, there's a gamble element to it of Sabonis is on the other contract for another 2 years. So if you don't re-sign him, you essentially traded Tyrese Haliburton away for 2 years of a rental. But that's a problem for another day. As of right now, there's reasons to be excited in Sacramento and also reasons to be terrified of watching the Pacers over the next few years.
I was just talking before we came in, like the attitude, the mentality of Sacramento, kind of feeling like, can we just get a decent team here for once, and then we'll worry about like championships and stuff like that. I think the people in Sacramento, both within the team and the fans, you just feel a little bit different based on the history, right? Like just how important is it to have a team that you can say, look, just get to the playoffs and let's just enjoy basketball for once?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And the impatience is certainly a major thing here in Sacramento, although there are a number of Kings fans who weren't minding the idea of the Kings being somewhat of sellers at this deadline and then looking towards the draft and looking towards next season and still keeping Fox and Haliburton and seeing if you could add one more young piece to that duo. And I understand that perspective. That might have even been the smart, kind of safe move for the Kings to make. But at the same time, too, the Kings have been trying to build through the draft for 15 freaking years. Granted, Monty McNair hasn't been around for both years. In his 2 years, he's drafted Tyrese Haliburton and Davion Mitchell, who looks like a pretty solid pickup. But the Kings, what they have not tried during this 15-year playoff drought is a move like this, a swing for the fences move to bring in an all-star. With the exception of the Chris Webber trade, this is the biggest acquisition in the history of the Sacramento Kings, bringing in Domantas Sabonis. So it's something different. It's something new. It's something refreshing. It gives us a reason to watch again, because this season was the first time in this entire 15-year drought, guys, that I have actually dreaded watching Kings basketball, even though this team before the trades had the talent to be much better than they were. They were one of my least favorite, if not the least favorite Kings team of all time. And I know a lot of fans echoed that sentiment. So just having something to watch and pay attention to that has potential to turn into something last night in the Golden One Center was special.
Well, Matt, that was a very sad statement. That made me sad for you. So I'm very happy for you now that this has happened and that you are excited to watch your team again.
But
Matt, thank you.
We're used to being sad, so it's okay. We appreciate the sympathy.
Gosh, well then being happy is just that much more exciting, isn't it? All right, Matt, we appreciate it. Thanks so much, everybody. That was Matt George with Locked On Kings. Shopify is the platform designed for anyone to sell anywhere, giving entrepreneurs like you the resources once reserved for big business. Go to shopify.com/lockedonnba for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Josh, we've got some questions from the chat here that we're going to address. The first one, who are the clear ads in fantasy basketball now?
I don't think it's going to be clear just at this point. There's still a bit to go down, but I am, as I said earlier, I'm liking maybe the value of Jalen Smith in Indiana. I think that as I said earlier, I don't think Porzingis is going to play much in Washington, so that means Gafford is going to get back into that rotation along with Thomas Bryant at center. I've got no idea who the Wizards' point guard is. I don't think anyone. Aaron Holiday's gone. Spencer Dinwiddie's gone. Bradley Beal's not there. Is Hal Neto playing 30 minutes a night at this point? I guess he is. I don't know. Corey Kispert gets a boost there, so maybe he becomes somewhat of an ad. Montrezl Harrell gets a boost in Charlotte. Not massively. They've still got Plumlee in Washington, so that gets a little bit crowded down there. Derek White loses value. I think Devin Vassell's a huge ad in San Antonio. They could still play Josh Richardson minutes over him, but Vassell would be one of the guys that I am that I'd be grabbing after that deal goes down. And I wouldn't drop Derek White just yet. We'll have to see what his role is. And I think Boston has still probably got a couple moves to come, but things are still up in the air, I guess, as to how this is all going to play out with more moves. In LA, I think with the Clippers, with Isaiah Hartenstein's interesting. I hope they play him big minutes. Ibaka wasn't playing every game for them. They were sometimes it'd be Zubats and Hartenstein, but then they play Morris or they play Covington or they play Batum at center. So there's no like, hey, there's 48 minutes here. It's going to be 24-24. I hope it's the case, but that's not a guarantee. But I think Hartenstein's a pretty solid ad there for LA as well.
All right, we've got one more question for you here. Is Andre Drummond a must roster now?
No, absolutely not. No, I don't. We talked about this a little bit earlier with John. I don't see it. Like if you are Steve Nash and you are saying the solution to our problem is playing him 30 minutes a night while Aldridge and Claxton you split the other 18, then you deserve to miss the playoffs because that's just not going to work. There's no need for that. He's not good. He hasn't been good in a lot of years. If he plays 30 minutes, he'll rack up fantasy stats. But any team that's got any inclination to try and win games, that is not going to be the path to do it. So no, I wouldn't be bothered adding. I wouldn't be bothered to add Andre Drummond in fantasy leagues.
All right, and the people want to know: should we add Derek White, or what do we do with Derek White?
We do, Derek. Yeah, I think you just got to hold him for now. Like, I don't know how it's all going to play out in Boston. I would assume that he is coming off the bench. They'll continue to start Horford and Williams. Maybe, John, you can chime in on this, and he'll come off the bench and fill in that Josh Richardson / Dennis Schroeder role, even though he hasn't been traded yet. And yeah, the 31, 32 minutes a night he was playing in San Antonio maybe becomes 28. I would hold him for now, but it could trend towards a drop. How do you see that playing out, John, with White in Boston?
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how that does play out based on what the next move is, because with Schroeder still on the roster, I expect something to happen here, because you gave up a wing in Josh Richardson to bring in Derek White. So he's more point guard, and he's very kind of like Marcus Smartish. He's the same size. They both struggle with their 3-point shot a bit. They're both tenacious defenders. And so my question right now is are they going like double bulldog at the, at the guard positions and starting both of those guys next to each other? And is White or Smart going to be playing off the ball? Or are they going Smart with White coming off the bench? Or is some kind of bigger deal coming where Smart is out and Derek White is the starter? That's the least likely scenario as far as I'm concerned right now, as I'm just like watching TweetDeck trying to see if there's another move coming. But right now there's a lot of questions in Boston.
There is another
how
move.
are they going to? Yeah, there's something's coming here. So
yeah, Daniel Tice
and
going back to Boston.
I was going to say the
All
deadline
right,
is quickly
Daniel Tice.
approaching.
Yeah, and Daniel
is
Tice is
interesting.
heading back to Boston. For what? I've got no idea. But that's the report from Kelly Eco of The Athletic, that Rockets are sending Daniel Tice to Boston, and we don't know for what or how. Yeah, Woj is just tweeting that now. Yeah, so that doesn't really clear much up, does it?
No, it does not. It adds more to the soup here. I don't know what this is. We got to see what the next thing is. This might be for Schroeder, and it might be a 1-for-1 for Schroeder. They're I think kind of similar salaries, if I'm not mistaken. So here we go. Let's see. There it is. Shams Charania. I was right. Dennis Schroeder to the Rockets for Daniel Tice. So now what you get in Daniel Tice is a third center, which probably means Enes Kanter Freedom is either gone or DNP'd for the rest of the season. Tice is your he's now, we will now let him be free, and no problem with me on that. And so now that solidifies the Derek White thing, where I think we're looking at Smart as your starter, White as your backup, maybe the Smart White pairing to close. So I would expect Derek White to get 30 minutes or so in Boston in this scenario. And it's good Marcus Smart insurance, because they play very similar style. So if Smart goes down with an injury, which he tends to do, White slides right in, and I don't think Boston loses a whole lot. So I think White's going to get a lot of opportunity there now that we see that Schroeder's out.
All right, guys, we'll go to a break right now, but we'll get more reaction to this trade and many more after the break. Indeed, when your business is starting its championship run, nothing matters more than finding and hiring the best team. With Indeed, you have the power to build a dynasty by hiring more MVPs and faster. If you're hiring, you need Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites hoping to find candidates with the right skills, you need one powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all. With Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description, and you can invite them to apply right away. Plus, you only need to pay for quality applications that meet your must-have requirements. One of the things I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring all in one place so easy. In a world where we are constantly searching for the app or browser we need, Indeed has it all in one place, and it's a relief. With Instant Match, over 90% of employers get quality candidates as soon as they sponsor their job post, according to Indeed data. Candidates you invite to apply through Instant Match are 3 times more likely to apply to your job than candidates who only see it in a search. Join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast.
Hey, let's talk about Shopify, which can help you grow your business online. I know when I go to a small business, I expect it to be able to take all of my payments. I expect it to do everything that the big business can do. But how do you do that? You do it with Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. It gives entrepreneurs the resources once reserved for those big businesses that I was talking about. So upstarts, startups, established businesses alike can sell everywhere, synchronize online and in-person sales, and effortlessly, it's harder for me to say, stay informed. Scaling your business is a journey of endless possibility. I love how Shopify has the tools and resources to make it easy for any business to succeed from down the street to around the globe. It levels the competition. Shopify powers millions of businesses from first sale to full scale. You can reach customers online across social networks with an ever-growing suite of channel integrations and apps, including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and more. Gain insights as you grow with detailed reporting of conversion rates, profit margins, and beyond. It's more than a store. Shopify grows with you. This is possibility powered by Shopify. Go to shopify.com/LockedOnNBA, all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial to get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Grow your business with Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/LockedOnNBA right now. That's shopify.com/LockedOnNBA.
All right, we are back. This is the Locked On NBA Trade Deadline Show. I'm your host, Kim Becker, alongside Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd and Locked On Celtics host John Karalis. And we have more to talk about in that short break that we just took. There is some action. So, Josh, I'm going to start with you on this one. The Boston Celtics are trading Dennis Schroeder to the Houston Rockets.
Yeah, so we talked about that deal a little bit before, but there's more pieces now. Bruno Fernando and Enes Freedom heading to Houston. That's not really having any impact for fantasy, but I do not think that Dennis Schroeder is going to play a second in Houston. There's no need for him to be there. We already saw what they've done with John Wall. You know, he's there as a backup point guard, but they're not taking minutes away from Kevin Porter Jr. or Jalen Green or even developing Josh Christopher or Garrison Matthews or any of these guys so that Dennis Schroeder can come in and hijack an offense and try and put up big numbers, whatever. Like maybe they keep him as an 18-minute-a-night backup. Maybe they buy him out. I think is most likely in that scenario. A lot of people I've saw in the chat, do we go and grab Schroeder now? Like, I don't think so. I don't think there's any way that he is playing large enough. He's not that good for a start. And there's no way that he is coming in, I don't think, to take minutes away from those guys they want to develop. The Rockets have got a pretty clear path of what they want to do. And that wouldn't involve limiting their players who they believe are part of their future in order to give someone like Schroeder on a 2.5-month rental the opportunity to cook up numbers so he can get paid. That makes no sense for me at all. So I don't think there's any real reason for anyone to go and add Dennis Schroeder. If he's on the waiver wire, if you do have him still on your fantasy roster, he can get all the way out of there. I don't think there's any reason to think that's going to impact what's happening in Houston too much.
This is an interesting scenario here because I think there is more to happen. The Celtics, as it stands, Daniel Tice coming back, Schroeder goes out. But if Enes and Bruno Fernando are both also gone, the Celtics have like 9 or 10 players on their roster, so they're well below the minimum. So something else needs to happen. I think there's going to be some tweaking here. I wouldn't be surprised if the Celtics happen to be involved in, if this grows perhaps into a bigger deal. See, all that needs to happen, and something that people need to know is right now they've agreed to this deal. They're on the call. They can still kind of be talking to other people, and the deal can grow as they're on the call waiting for this to happen. So the Celtics can still kind of work around the periphery to bring in some players. It's all about the sequencing now, about when guys go out and when guys come back. We might see some of the two-way guys, maybe a Sam Hauser gets called up and does and gets a guaranteed contract. But the big deal here for the Celtics, and that's minor stuff, the Celtics get a backup big, a third big that they can rely on. They know Daniel Tice, even though Ime Udoka is the coach right now. Brad Stevens is still in the organization. They know Daniel Tice. He can get all the intel there. That's a guy that can kind of fill in a good insurance protection against an Al Horford who's kind of old. Schroeder goes out, so now that solidifies. They're building around Marcus Smart, Derek White. They've improved now significantly defensively. They've, I think, brought in some reliable people. Dennis Schroeder kind of was taking too many possessions. I think they've kind of streamlined who they're going to be this season, and now that they've gone on their little bit of a run, this kind of makes them a very strong defensive team, and maybe it kind of bumps up their offense to a point where they have at least a puncher's chance. I mean, it doesn't put Boston into the top 3 or anything like that, or even the top 4, but at least Boston now has a chance to compete for that middle 4, 5, 6 kind of not in the play-in tournament.
Josh, I think you have some questions from the chat we'll get to.
Yes, I do. Thanks, Kim. Lots going on here in the chat. Lots of stuff. Quick thing: the Knicks aren't making any trades. The Hawks aren't making any trades. The Bulls aren't making any trades. I've seen all that go down. Number of questions asking, "Hey, does Enes Freedom have any impact on Alperen Şengün?" The answer to that should hopefully be a guaranteed no. I wouldn't expect anything to be issue or any issue there with Şengün's playing time. Remember, Tice wasn't playing before. Freedom and Fernando aren't going to play really here either, so I don't think we need to worry too much about that one. Just what else we got here in the chat of questions you guys have? There's a lot happening here. Lakers didn't make a trade. No, that's the look. Well, that's how things are looking. But you're right, John. There's a lot still to happen for Boston because there are a lot of roster spots there. Because we haven't talked about the huge Bol PJ Dozier salary dump that happened earlier in the day. Not that we need to.
That's right. That's right. Groundbreaking stuff.
Another interesting thing, I think, back to Washington, given there's no point guard, I don't know if they're going to play Denny Avdia like as a point forward. Can he get more minutes there? Is it just Hal Netter? I don't know. I think they've got Joel Ayayi as a two-way guy. They're going to call him up and play him real backup minutes. There's still a lot happening there. Rashawn Holmes, by the way, hasn't been moved by the Kings. Marvin Bagley was moved. I think that those of you holding Rashawn Holmes in fantasy can go ahead and drop him now. They're not going to play him and Sabonis together very much. So he's I feel like a pretty clear drop in most situations. I think that's covering majority of the chat at the moment. I'll get to some more, I'm sure, a little bit later on.
All right. Well, are you looking for a daily fantasy option for the NBA? Then you need to try the award-winning app Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. That is prizepicks.com. I mean, do you guys want to touch on that whole Lakers question? I know someone said that the Lakers haven't made a move. Were you guys expecting them to make a move? John, we'll start with you.
Yeah. I mean, I never expected them to be able to pull anything off. This was the Lakers. They had basically 3 trade assets. They had Taylor Horton Tucker. They had a number 1 overall pick in like 2027, 28, and they had Kendrick Nunn. They just didn't have anything that anybody else would have wanted. So you heard them in talks about Terrence Ross. Why would the Orlando Magic take back a pick that far out and a guy under contract for a few more years for that player? You give up Terrence Ross to maybe pick up a pick somewhere more recently that fits your timeline. So the Lakers, I always saw, once you made that Russell Westbrook trade, this was the team, and this is the team. And so maybe they can find a way to add somebody in the buyout market, but there is almost no one, unless somehow Goran Dragic is he will be bought out. But if he looks at the Lakers and says that's my best chance to win a title, then maybe that could be an impact guy. But if the Lakers are going to be counting on the buyout market rarely gives anybody of any major impact. Dragic could be the exception this time around, but I don't think the Lakers are even in the mix. And we're looking at other teams. I mean, I would rather go to Miami if I was him. I'd rather go to one of these other Eastern teams if I was him to kind of make the run to a ring, to chase a ring. So I think this is it. I think the Lakers are the Lakers right now. They made a big gamble, high risk move for Westbrook. There was the potential for a high reward, but there's also this huge risk for it all falling apart. And that's how it went down. Unless Westbrook comes out of this deadline with some sort of renewed kind of, being at ease, he has had a tendency in the past to kind of play better in the second half, but also in the second half where he has played better, the teams have made moves to clear the path for him. When Houston made their move to clear Clint Capella, when they made their trade with Atlanta a few years ago, that was a move that got Westbrook a ton of open space to drive and everything like that. The Lakers didn't do anything. The problems are still there. So I don't expect history to repeat itself there because the Lakers couldn't do anything to allow Westbrook any more freedom. This is who they are. And unless there's some internal kind of like turnaround, us against the world kind of thing, and they find something within themselves, the Lakers are going to be the Lakers, and we can see them just kind of like fading away.
Well, I think that LeBron James agrees with you on that one, that the Lakers are just the Lakers after the comments that he made last night about wanting to just go home and drink wine and start tomorrow. It's like, whoa, okay. I think he's agreed that this season might be a wash for them. I don't know. That was my take on it. But let's look back at some things that happened leading up to today. We had the Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum era breaking up. They are no longer together because CJ McCollum is going to the Pelicans to play with Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram. The details of this trade, let's hear from Locked On Pelicans host Jake Madison and Locked On Blazers host Mike Richmond as they weighed in on it.
When the Pelicans get CJ McCollum, Larry Nance Jr., and Tony Snell, and the Blazers get Josh Hart, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Didi Louzada, Tomas Satoransky, and a protected first round pick that probably is maybe going to get kicked to another year. And there's some seconds involved as well. Honestly, this one just kind of makes sense for both sides to me, I think. It's really kind of as simple as that, right?
Yeah, you can see it from the Blazers' perspective. They get a good role player in Josh Hart who can help them be good now, but not too good, so they can get their draft pick. And they get out from under CJ McCollum's money, and they're set up to be, I don't want to use this word because it's meaningless, but flexible in the summer.
Yeah, exactly. I think it kind of accomplishes what both teams wanted. The Pelicans, who are one of the worst offensive teams in the league, one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the league, get a guy that's a 20-point per game scorer for the last 7 years, including this one. And for his career, he's 40% from three. Is his contract a little much? Yeah, probably. $30 million plus this year, $30 million each of the next 2 years plus. But I think it's a move they kind of have to make. There's a little bit of desperation to it, but it's like a poker player who's starting to get short stacked. Eventually, you're going to get a hand that's good enough and you go all in with it. And the Pelicans kind of did that with CJ McCollum here. And I think Larry Nance Jr. getting thrown in, if he's healthy, is a nice little like something extra for this deal. But for Portland, who's trying to, it feels like retool for at least 1 year, right? Like this is similar to, I think, the Golden State Warriors on like a 1 year stealth tank, something along those lines.
That's generous, but yeah,
to build it back up around Dame, right?
Yeah, they want to be good in the fall, and this trade gives them an opportunity to do that. They get a draft pick. They potentially have 2 lottery picks. They'll have a lot of cap space, somewhere between 20 and 45 million, depending on what they do. Cap space isn't super valuable for free agency, but it might be for trades, which is going to be valuable for a non-glamour market. So it gets them closer to the path, but they got worse. Like, let's be real. They're worse today, but they wanted to be worse, so it's not that bad.
Yeah, and look, the Pelicans are fighting for the 10th spot, and they really want to sniff the postseason. I think this move helps them this year accomplish that. I think CJ McCollum also next year and in future seasons is a guy that's going to fit around Zion Williamson really well. Anytime you can get an elite shooter like that, put him around your big who can score at will around the rim is a really great thing. And I think it also shows to Zion that this team is really committed to trying to win, and maybe that eases some of the tension between him and the organization.
For more on that one, as always, go to Locked On NBA on YouTube. Josh, you've got a lot of questions, so I'm going to step back here. I'm going to let you take this one.
Yeah, there's a lot happening here. Yeah, for those of you asking about Alperen Şengün, as I've been saying for a long time, yes, you need to add him. I still think that Daniel Gafford is worth having a look at. I don't think Porzingis is playing anytime soon in Washington. I did forget to mention earlier on that Ish Smith came across in that trade, so he's going to play some of those point guard minutes. I don't think there's a clear winner between Neto and Smith as the starting point guard that you want to go out and rush to add those guys. I could see Smith getting the minutes and maybe being useful, but I'm not super interested in him as a Musk sort of grab player. Hartenstein's got value again, but Ibaka wasn't playing every night. So Hartenstein can get a boost, but it also may not change huge amounts there. Devin Vassell's an interesting ad, I think, in San Antonio with those trades that went down. I'd be happy to drop Rashawn Holmes. I'd be happy to drop Dennis Schroeder. A lot of people are asking earlier about Marvin Bagley as well in Detroit. I don't really see it. Yeah, Jeremy Grant hasn't moved. Isaiah Stewart is still there. Kelly Olynyk is still there. Sadiq Bey is still there. So does Bagley just take Trey Lyles' minutes? Maybe he takes some off Olynyk. I would not be bothered to add him in most formats. His role, amazingly enough, Bagley's minutes might actually decrease from the 23 or 24 he was playing in Sacramento when he goes to Detroit, because there's no clear path for him to start. He's not starting over Grant, Bey, or Stewart. He's going to come off the bench, and that role is not going to be larger or significantly larger than what it was in Sacramento. Let's see if there's any other questions here. Tyrese Maxey loses value a lot with James Harden in town. I wouldn't drop him just yet. Like, there are other guys you can drop. Kelly Olynyk's one of those players that you can drop, I'm guessing, just to see how it plays out. He will still start. He's going to just start because Harden takes Seth Curry's spot. But he is going to lose value, because his value we saw earlier in the year when his usage was down was pretty much nothing. And with James Harden there, his usage is going to be pretty low. So I wouldn't expect him to maintain that value, but I'm not going to drop him just yet. Montrezl Harrell gets a boost in Charlotte, but still PJ Washington and Mason Plumlee are there. So it's not like he's just rolling into 28 minutes a night and you're going to just completely marginalize those guys. So he can be an ad, but it's not a significantly better position than what he was in Washington. So I think that's probably I'm sure there's other ones. Oh, Thad Young, that's the other one that people are asking me about. We know that the Raptors starters are going to play huge minutes. What this does is it takes Chris Boucher off the board for 12-team leagues. I don't think you need to hold him there. Hopefully we're not subjected to watching too much more Precious Achiuwa up in Toronto. Thad might play 21 or 22 minutes, but I don't think he's playing 26 or 27. He had some extra depth there, but they already had a bunch of big men that they were playing off the bench, and he just sort of moves into that mix, and one of those guys comes out. So I'm not as convinced as others that he becomes an absolute guaranteed big minute must roster player.
All right. Well, yeah, you've got, oh my gosh, so many players here new players that might be better on their new teams, new for fantasy, and then some that you should probably sit. So those are great insight. Josh, as always, thank you so much. John, let's move it over to you. The Boston Celtics are finally picking it up. They've won their last 6 games. What do you think the biggest change for this team has been?
Sorry, I turn my microphone on again. I think what they've done is they've really solidified themselves as a defense-first team. When you move Schroeder out and bring in Derek White, that's a very clear upgrade defensively. Schroeder freelances a bit when he's in there, was very much a cause of some of the breakdowns. And now, it'll take a little while for White to get up to speed, but he's a good defender. And I think between him and Marcus Smart, that's going to be a very tenacious thing. One thing that this does do is you get 48 minutes of Smart and White on the floor if you stagger them, and you can put them on the floor together, and you've got 2 pit bulls defensively at the top, the point of attack. And when you consider that Robert Williams is back there, you could play those 2 together, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Robert Williams is having a tremendous defensive year, super athletic, can block shots from places that people don't expect him to block a shot. The players have talked about that, where they can go out there and be more aggressive on the perimeter. So now you've got really good defenders who can be more aggressive. This could up the transition basketball you see the Celtics play, that pace that the Celtics play with. So you talk about a team whose offensive rating is somewhere down around the 17, 18, 19 range, but their defensive rating is second best in the league and best in the league since January 1st. That's an upgrade offensively. If you can get onto transition, the easy way to put points on the board, and it's an easy way for Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown to put points on the board. And if they're getting easy points like that, that means they can move the ball a little bit more. in the half court and you're not relying on isolation basketball. So improving the defense that the Celtics are playing is going to improve the offense, I think, exponentially. And they have the potential now to start carrying that through. It doesn't put them in the upper echelon of the East still. I think there are moves that need to be made. And there are, at this point, still 5 open roster spots. So the Celtics have gutted the back end of their roster, and they do need to add some depth there. But overall, I think the Celtics have positioned themselves to be in that challenging position that, you know, the Toronto Raptors, the Charlotte Hornets, everybody in that 4, 5, 6 beyond range. The Celtics have now, I think, solidified themselves as one of the true competitors in that range. So overall, I think a good trade deadline for Boston.
Okay, so to sum that one up, John, finish this sentence for me. The Celtics are the best when they ... so that the people all know that this is really when they are on their prime. Yeah,
the Celtics are at their best when they defend and get move and play with pace. That I think is all encompassing. When they defend, as we saw, I think if you watch that first 6 or 7 minutes against the Brooklyn Nets the other night, even though those Nets, that was a very depleted Nets team, the way the Celtics played was what I'm talking about. The Nets couldn't get anything at all inside of the arc, and then Boston pushed the pace, got out and ran. And even if they had to pull it out into the half court, that pace, that meant the ball was moving and all of that. So starts on the defense for the Boston Celtics, you know, as opposed to like the Charlotte Hornets. They're the anti-Hornets. The Hornets have no defense, all offense. The Celtics are all defense, and they hope that can increase their offense.
All right, John, thanks so much, everyone. Let's look back again to a trade that happened earlier in the week, one of the more surprising ones. Just the other day when the Kings sent Tyrese Haliburton to the Pacers for Domantas Sabonis. Let's go to our Locked On NBA insider and former NBA pro, Antonio Daniels, who is also a color analyst for the Pelicans. So he had a lot to say on this deal. Hey everyone, Kim Becker here with a Locked On NBA Insider Report, and joining me is SiriusXM NBA radio host Antonio Daniels. Antonio, we've got another trade to talk about here, and one that piqued interest of fans across the NBA on Tuesday. The Pacers traded Domantas Sabonis, Jeremy Lamb, and Justin Holiday to Sacramento for Tyrese Haliburton, Buddy Hield, and Tristan Thompson. Antonio, what is going on with this one?
My initial thought, Kim, honestly, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful manner, what's the thought process in Indiana? Is my initial thought. So a few days before that, you get rid of Caris LeVert to Cleveland. And again, just like in other trades that happen, there's always another shoe to drop. The next shoe is Domantas Sabonis. And Domantas Sabonis is a 2-time All-Star. Domantas Sabonis is 25 years old and a guy that I deem worthy of building around. I don't know if it was the lack of chemistry between him and Miles Turner. I don't know what the deal was. But to get rid of a guy like Domantas Sabonis, and not just Sabonis, you have a shooter. You have a really, really good shooter in Justin Holiday. You know, you have a decent player in Jeremy Lamb. So you're getting rid of all of that, and you're bringing in the piece that they really wanted back was Tyrese Haliburton, who is not a bad basketball player by no stretch of the imagination. Obviously, Sacramento had a bunch of guards that they had to rid themselves of. So it wasn't just Haliburton. Now you get Buddy Hield, you get another shooter in return because, again, you got rid of Justin Holiday. But my initial thought was, if you're the Indiana Pacers, are you falling into an unhealthy cycle of constantly starting over? Because when you get rid of a guy like Domantas Sabonis, guys like that for the future aren't easy to replace.
Coming up, we will get to the best tweet of the day surrounding the biggest deal of the day. Stay tuned. Don't let the stress of daily life weigh on your body. Whether you're an elite athlete or someone like me, except for I still consider myself an elite athlete sometimes, but we are just trying to make it through the day tension-free. Theragun can help. Theragun is the handheld percussive therapy device that releases your deepest muscle tension using a scientifically calibrated combo of depth, speed, and power. And it's quiet like an electric toothbrush. The Gen 4 Theragun doesn't just feel good, it gets to the source of the pain by releasing tension. Use Theragun's signature percussive therapy, which goes 60% deeper than vibration alone. Whether you want to treat your muscle tension from working out, from an injury, or just the stresses of everyday life, because we've all got those, there's no substitute for the Theragun Gen 4. I use this and you should too. Seriously, it's the best. It makes you never want to stop using it. We all need a Theragun to recover and feel our best for the next day. Theragun is trusted by 250 professional sports teams like Real Madrid and elite athletes like Paul George, DeAndre Hopkins, Maria Sharapova, hundreds of thousands of customers, and me. Try Theragun for 30 days starting at only $199. If you go to theragun.com/lockedon right now, you can get your Gen 4 Theragun today. That's theragun.com/lockedon, theragun.com/lockedon, tongue twister, theragun.com.
BetOnline has you covered with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Football, big game coming this weekend. So why don't you throw a couple bucks down on that at betonline.net. It remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's not just football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of current games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, we are back. And before we get back to the Harden-Simmons trade, let's take a look at the best tweet of the day surrounding the biggest deal. I think we've got a graphic here, and it is something. You guys want to weigh in on this one or what?
It's great. It's brilliant. I love it. Just firing up the old funeral tweet. It's really good stuff from Embiid, and everyone's going to be waiting for that first game between the Nets and the Sixers. It's going to be pretty exciting to watch, I reckon.
Joel Embiid is a professional troll, and
good for him. Why wouldn't you be?
I mean,
I would be.
Look. This is for those of you who don't know what that is. It's called one of the stopping by one of your biggest haters' funerals, and so this is just another shot. Look, this is funny, right? But this is also like part of this whole thing is Embiid's fault. Like, let's have Embiid have a little bit of like personal responsibility here. Part of why they were even in this position was that Embiid just came right out after that playoff loss and was basically saying, yeah, that was Ben Simmons' fault, when Embiid has had his own fair share of playoff failures. So, but ultimately, look, it's the NBA and star players get what they want. And so Embiid wanted Simmons out and Harden wanted out of Brooklyn. So you get James Harden as a member of the Sixers, and you get Paul Millsap as part of the deal, and Simmons, Curry, Drummond, and 2 first-rounders heading over to Brooklyn. So just hilarious. Look, say what you want. I'll say everything. I'm not a big Joel Embiid fan, but hilarious meme. And for his sake, this better work out, because if the Sixers don't win now, then I think he bears some of the brunt of that responsibility.
All right. So again, that is the 76ers receiving James Harden and Paul Millsap. The Nets receive Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and 2 first-round picks. So that was arguably, or not arguably really, the biggest deal of the day here. I think we've got some more questions, though, in the chat. Seems that it's still blowing up. They still want to know about fantasy. Josh, before we get to some of those, can you just recap, in case people weren't listening before, what players do you think will be better fantasy players on their new teams?
Well, it's a loaded question, Kim. There's a lot going on. Obviously, it's a boost for Ben Simmons because he was literally not playing at all. You're going to get some improvements from Jalen Smith in Indiana. I think that's a pretty interesting one. Montrezl Harrell gets a little bit of a boost. Ish Smith, Hull Neto, Daniel Gafford, Tom Bryant all get big boosts in Washington. Again, I don't really expect Kristaps Porzingis with his knee bone bruise to play a huge, significant role. I think it hurts Dinwiddie heading to Dallas when there's already Brunson and Doncic there. He's just not going to get those 30-plus minutes a night. I wouldn't expect. I think it helps Maxi Kleber and Dwight Powell. I think they're more fringe players for most fantasy leagues, most standard fantasy leagues, but there is a little bit of a boost in their value. I think Derek White gets hurt a little bit going to Boston. Just the role will be a bit reduced. I think Devin Vassell gets a big bump in San Antonio. He's a pretty interesting ad. He's a guy I'd be adding everywhere. But overall, there's not these huge absolute standout, oh my God, this guy's going to be a top 50 player from here on out due to these trades. I haven't really seen a move like that. You've got these guys sort of on the periphery, like a Thad Young sort of a player who is going to get more boost because he wasn't playing, but is that going to be something that turns around a fantasy league? I'm not sure that there's that many of those all around. Seth Curry he probably lose a little bit of value, but again, this is all stuff where a lot of these players are maybe marginally moving sideways, and there's probably more big losers than huge winners. Like Tyrese Maxey loses quite a bit in this situation. He moves maybe to even a fringe guy. Rashawn Holmes has lost a ton. With Sabonis moving to Sacramento, Kelly Olynyk didn't get any opportunity really in Detroit to have his value rise, and now Bagley's there. So there's more losers, I feel, than gigantic, huge winners.
Alrighty, okay. And can we switch that? We'll flip it to the opposite. Is there anyone that you think now should just be sat and not played with all of these moves happening?
Yeah, I think you got to look at Schroeder for one, Rashawn Holmes. He's probably the big one. Tyrese Maxey's going to head towards that area. I don't think he's quite there yet. But to me, Rashawn Holmes is the biggest loser here. He goes from a guy that could have been a top 60 player, even though he wasn't playing very well before the trade, to a guy that might play 15 minutes a night behind Domantas Sabonis. So he loses tons of value. Spencer Dinwiddie loses quite a bit of value, I think, as well, behind both Doncic and Brunson in Dallas. So he loses out significantly. I do think that maybe PJ Washington loses a bit with Harrell arriving in Charlotte, just because there isn't that upside for him to play high 20s in minutes anymore. So I think he loses quite a bit through that deal. They're probably the major ones that are coming through my head at the moment.
Alrighty, cool. With Indeed, you have the power to build a dynasty by hiring more MVPs faster. Learn more at Indeed.com/locked. If you're hiring, you need Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. Learn more at Indeed.com/locked. John, I know that there's a lot going on here, obviously, with the Celtics, but with a lot of other teams that we haven't touched on as well, is there anything that you want to throw in there and give us your 2 cents?
I mean, I'm just looking at the standings here. I'm trying to figure out how these moves are going to impact and teams that we thought might have made moves that didn't. We didn't talk much about the Utah Jazz making their move with Portland. I think Utah getting Nickeil Alexander-Walker and moving on from Joe Ingles, they have the potential there to add an impact player there that's not Juancho Hernan-Gomez. But you look in the West, and the Suns, I think, made a good move today, solidifying, you move a young player that wasn't going to be playing much, and you get a versatile wing in return. I think the Suns in the West did a good deal to kind of keep themselves up at the top of the standings. I think the Jazz have the potential, if Nickeil Alexander-Walker can kind of fit into that system, and I think that system will allow him to be more free offensively. I think that's a team to watch as far as just ancillary around the periphery. Can they make a move in the standings? I'm super intrigued by what the Dallas Mavericks did. If Dinwiddie, Bertans is such a wild card in this, because he had been just a knockdown shooter for so long. And you look at his overall career percentage, 40% from three last year, 39% from three, 32% from three in this one. When he gets into that Dallas system playing off of Luka Doncic, did the Dallas Mavericks get a steal in this one? That's a high potential steal category, a guy that people haven't talked about much at all. Again, you pick up Dinwiddie, who's a point guard. They get the help that they need there. Did the Mavericks do enough to kind of get into that top 4? I didn't see the Denver Nuggets do anything spectacular here at the deadline. So that's a team I thought might have made a move. Clippers trying to work around the periphery to get out of the play-in. I thought they added some nice kind of like role players. Is that going to be a team to watch moving up in the standings? In the East, I'm watching Miami in the buyout market here. I think Miami has something cooking. And either they didn't pull off a big deal here at the deadline, but I think they're a team to watch in the offseason. But Miami could be a team for Dragic. I wonder if maybe Dallas got Dinwiddie because they might have seen the writing on the wall when it came to Dragic. I know the Mavs were one of the teams that were in that conversation to sign Dragic on a buyout market. Now maybe not so much. Milwaukee Bucks, half game out of first. They add Serge Ibaka. That could be one of those like little tiny moves, a role player, a guy that might be able to stretch the floor for them, be more effective for them. So those two teams, obviously Philly and Brooklyn. I think Brooklyn, when they get healthy, is going to make a move up. Question is, where in the season do they get fully healthy? And what's Brooklyn going to end up being? Do we have the potential here for Philly 2.5 games out of first place? Let's throw this out there, this question out there. Josh, imagine this situation. Philadelphia 76ers right now, 2.5 games out of first. They get James Harden. They take off. They go up to like the 3 seed. And the Brooklyn Nets, 5.5 games out of first. They struggle for a while. And then they get together. They move up to the 6 seed. You have the potential here for the 3-6 to be Philly, Brooklyn in the first round. Imagine that happening.
Yeah, I think both these teams are going to jump up, and that could be a really likely situation. But we're talking about this year. Like the Sixers are only 2 games behind the Bucks. Like it's not. Yeah, that's from the 2 seed. Like it's not that spread out. It's not, or to use a fancy word, it's not that striated throughout the Eastern Conference standings. But to me, how you feel, John? I think the Sixers are the team is probably going to move up the standings the most. Again, they traded Seth Curry for James Harden. Like in terms of the playing personnel that they have at the moment, that's the upgrade they made. It's huge. It's a gigantic move up. Look, the Kings will maybe move up. They probably will move up a little bit this year, but is it consequential? I doubt it. The Nets, do they move up? Is getting Simmons and Curry for Harden an upgrade? I'm not sure. I think they improve a little bit, but probably not as much as Philadelphia. And I think most of the other moves, like they're not gigantic ones. Like, does Dallas improve from trading away an injured Porzingis for an ineffectual Spencer Dinwiddie? I don't think so. Does Washington get better because getting this deal? I don't think so. Maybe Toronto's the other one that could step up. Just getting someone capable on the bench so that Nick Nurse doesn't have to play his starters 52 minutes every game. That would be helpful. They would have been good to get themselves someone who was more guard or wing sized, I guess, rather than every single player being a forward or center that comes off their bench. But they get help. And I do agree with you about Goran Dragic. I think that he's been training in Miami this whole time. Like his personal leave from Toronto just was, I need to sit on the beach in Miami and work out there. So I reckon that's exactly where he is headed. And won't be headed to Dallas. I think that Miami one is almost as big a lock as you can get, that he will end up there and provide really strong value. Like Gabe Vincent's been good for them coming off the bench, but Dragic is Dragic, and he can still do what he does in those limited minutes. And I think it's a pretty big upgrade. They can't go higher in the East than where they are, but I think it does significantly improve their team, if that is, of course, what ends up happening.
All right, well, let's bring someone in to talk about a team that made no moves. Our Locked On Lakers host, Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, welcome in the Lakers. I mean, I could go on and on about what is going on with the Lakers, but I'm going to get your take. Today, no moves before the trade deadline, but how are you feeling about this team right now?
I mean, okay, that's a separate question from how am I feeling about what they did at the deadline. How am I feeling about them? Not great, Kim. They are not a great team at the moment, and there is not a lot to feel great about where things currently stand. As far as the deadline goes, I am not particularly surprised that they didn't make a move because they didn't have a ton of flexibility or options. Basically all of their assets, including some that would be considered distressed or negative, were basically Talen Horton-Tucker, who has underperformed this season, Kendrick Nunn, who has not played this season, Russell Westbrook, who could be more toxic on his own team than he is around the league, and he's considered pretty toxic around the league, and a 2027 pick. So, I mean, they didn't have a lot to work with from there. And I got to say, I'm actually glad that they did not make a desperation, got to do something for the sake of doing something Band-Aid move that I don't think would have necessarily saved this season, if for no other reason than I'm not sure it's savable. And it would have been a bad use of your limited assets. So I am glad that I don't know what options they had out there and if anything was good, but I am glad that they did not do some of the dumber rumor possibilities that we saw being reported leading up to this moment.
I mean, when we look at what they gambled on here in the offseason, you and I talked on trade day when we were doing the live trade show. And when you looked at it from there, your initial perspective on that Westbrook trade, how has your opinion evolved between then and now? Like when you look back on what you were excited about and what you thought maybe you were hopeful about, where did things kind of like start to go wrong for you from now? And how does that impact your opinion on the Lakers front office?
I mean, I was never a big fan of the move to begin with. I remember it was funny. There was a few days before they actually made the move, there had been a couple reports about the Lakers potentially being interested in Russell Westbrook. And Brian and I actually did a show that was basically dedicated to how ridiculous a rumor that was. Because, like, why on earth would the Lakers trade for Russell Westbrook? That seemingly made no sense whatsoever. Then all of a sudden, they ended up doing it. There are elements of it that if you ask me to squint and think about the best case scenario version of the Lakers, I could understand the logic of trading for Westbrook. Like the idea that this is a team that operates best in transition. Russell Westbrook operates best in transition. This is a team that does best trying to create leverage and pressure at the rim offensively. Russell Westbrook does that, or at least did do that very well over the course of his career. LeBron clearly, or the front office, or both, had wanted to see some of that playmaking burden taken off of him. And in certain respects, I thought Russell Westbrook was the best kind of poor man's version of LeBron that you could have gotten out there. And you can do a lot worse than a poor man's version of LeBron playing well, just in terms of being able to kind of do all the different things that LeBron does for an offense, albeit not as well as LeBron, because nobody does it as well as LeBron. But the obvious reasons that I don't really even need to list of why I thought it wouldn't work, why I thought it was way too big and unnecessary of a move, they've come to fruition, but they've actually been worse than I expected. And some of this is circumstances beyond the Lakers' control, you know, the injuries and COVID and stuff like that. But some of this was, you know, a lot of it, frankly, was self-inflicted wounds. And they're dealing with that right now, and it has not been pretty.
Now you're sitting there and you have LeBron, and he's still LeBron to some degree, but like it's not like he's prime LeBron. We're starting to see like the other side, right? And because he's LeBron, the other side still looks pretty damn good. But there's a reason why you made this deal, and was, like you said, to take the pressure off of him. And now you don't know, like, where do you go from here? A lot of these guys on minimum salaries are gone, but you still have these guys under contract. It's not just this season, but like your future here with the Lakers. Like, what's the future look like for the Lakers?
I don't know, man. I mean, that was one of the reasons why neither Brian and I really liked that move with Westbrook, was in part because you were locking yourself not just into this season, but next season. You know what I mean? Like this was very much your future for a couple years, because you lost every bit of flexibility that you had in terms of maneuvers that you could make and different things that you could do. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I would prefer, the Westbrook for John Wall rumors have been out there if the Lakers have been willing to attach a first round pick to Westbrook. And that to me was ridiculous. I don't know why you would do that. I mean, that that possibility is likely there this summer anyway. But I would rather wait till the offseason where maybe you can turn that contract into a few players, maybe not even great players or great contracts, but you just get more flexibility. I mean, among the different things the Lakers did wrong this offseason was not retaining Alex Caruso. And beyond what Caruso does on the court, he would have been another tradable piece for them. He would have been another asset. He would have given them more options, because the minute they traded for Westbrook and then on top of it decided that they weren't going to pay for both THT and Caruso, and in the short term at least they chose wrong in the prioritizing of that, they made themselves pot committed in terms of just flexibility and the different things they could do. So they need to try, if possible, to find ways to give themselves more depth and more routes. I don't know how they're going to do it.
All right, Andy. Well, we appreciate your time again. It's not looking too good for.
Sorry to be such a
the
downer,
Lakers.
Kim.
I know. I was going to say that was a total buzzkill. We had like a great first half of the show. There was stuff going on. People were excited, and now we are talking about.
Do you want me to talk about some teams I think did well? I
Honestly.
I want to seem like Locked On
Honestly,
Lakers is just an unpleasant space. We're usually pretty fun, and I think it's stuff.
Andy, I know it's about noon over there in LA, but go have a drink.
You know what? I
honestly,
would,
yes.
except John, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to plug this. 6:00 Pacific time, I will be on Spectrum Sportsnet, the Lakers broadcast partner television, doing their Spectrum Sportsnet or the Access Lakers show. So I can't start drinking now. Otherwise,
I think
maybe
you
I
can.
would.
I think it'll
but
make it a lot more fun. Just do
Another-
it.
another
It'll be more
deadline
fun.
loss for the
It'll make your
Lakers.
sad comments just more
the
exciting.
the only person allowed to do that on set, whether you're talking about maybe open up a glass of wine or light a cigar, is James Worthy. And I am not James Worthy. I don't have his
talking about?
clout.
This isn't coffee in here, man. This has been bourbon this whole time.
Yeah, that's between you and David. Thanks,
All
guys.
right, Andy. Thank you so much. Okay,
I will say,
everyone.
if I can-
Shopify.
No, go ahead. Tell people about Shopify.
I'm gonna plug the Shopify. Then it's all you,
More
John.
important than what I
Okay,
gotta
guys,
say.
start selling on Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/lockedonnba for a free 14-day trial. Again, that is shopify.com/lockedonnba. John, it's all you.
Yeah, no, I'm just kind of curious about how this impacts this was LeBron. Clearly, LeBron and AD, they were like, we want Russell Westbrook. And then the Lakers went like, all right, you get Russell Westbrook. And that kind of put them into this position when most people on the outside sit there and say, why did you do that? And I just wonder how this is going to impact this whole player, the power that they have. Are GMs going to tell some of their players now moving forward, like, hey, I know you want this guy, but you don't want to be the Lakers and Westbrook, do you? And let's talk about this in a real sense. So when I'm looking at young players, like I covered the Celtics, Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown going into Brad Stevens and saying, hey, we want this guy, the Celtics will feel compelled to be like, yeah, we want to keep you happy because you're the foundation of our team. However, we don't want this to turn into Westbrook and the Lakers. And so that could be, I think, something that front offices kind of throw back at their stars and say, let's talk about this realistically and have a conversation, rather than a guy goes in. And I know it's LeBron and they have a tendency to dictate things, but I think the best front offices have the people in charge with the power of the ownership behind them, this structure, that they have more dialogue along the way with their stars rather than dictating the moves. So I think LeBron is going to take a bit of a hit for this because, he's the face of the franchise, and it's very obvious that he pushed for this, and this is, it doesn't impact his legacy necessarily, but this was a chance for the Lakers to pass Boston. I know it's an important thing between the Celtics and the Lakers as far as total championships. And if they can't, after 3-4 years with LeBron, if you only get one title out of that, that's going to be a disappointment for the Lakers.
I mean, I think that you could be right with that one, but that LeBron James will take a little bit of the hit. But I think at the end of the day, it's LeBron James, right? I mean, not every player
Sure. I
can
mean, it's
have the same clout and say who he wants, who he doesn't want. I mean, as much as LeBron James can. But Josh, let's throw it over to you. I know we've got a couple more questions coming from the chat.
Yeah, there's tons of questions here. Again, I think I've covered most of the stuff, but reiterating some of the guys that I think if you're looking in your fantasy league to add, Devin Vassell looks pretty good. I'm pretty interested in Jalen Smith. The Turner situation in Indiana clouds that. We don't know when or if Miles Turner is coming back, but Goga Badadze is probably going to be a short-term option at least there. Smith and Isaiah Jackson will be sort of fighting for minutes at the backup 5 and starting 4, so they could both be options as well. I'd be dropping Rashawn Holmes. Derek White and Tyrese Maxey lose a lot, but I wouldn't drop them at this point. I wouldn't add Andre Drummond. I wouldn't necessarily rush to add Maxi Kleber. I think he might have value, but I wouldn't rush to do it. I think Spencer Dinwiddie is probably going to be a drop as well if he wasn't already. Well, he probably was already. Ish Smith or Hal Neto will be interesting options to watch in Washington. Corey Kispert could get a little bit of a boost there, and I think Dan Gafford and Tom Bryant are going to get some pretty interesting boosts to their value with Harrell gone. They should split those minutes. I could be wrong on that. I don't foresee Porzingis playing a huge amount this season in Washington with that bone bruise. I know they're just out of the play-in, but they've just shut Bradley Beal down with surgery for the season, and Porzingis has got a real injury in his knee, so I think they're more looking to reload it for next season, would be my guess, especially when they're going into the season without like a legitimate NBA starting caliber point guard for the rest of the year. They're not going to be like, let's fight through and really push forward with Porzingis' dodgy knee and Hal Neto running the show. I don't think that would be a wise move for any team, let alone a team that's struggling so much like the Wizards are at the moment. So they're probably my major takeaways at the moment. I'm just going to look if there's any other questions here in the chat. Would we add Buddy Hield? Oh, that's a question. Probably not. I think he's fine as a backup-y sort of a player, but this is all going to depend on Brogdon's health and whether he goes or not. But I don't think that he is an absolute must-add sort of a player. I think Davion Mitchell is interesting enough, but Dante DiVincenzo and Justin Holiday and Jeremy Lamb are all going to cut into his upside, but he's worth having for now. Hartenstein is a guy in LA, but again, Ibaka wasn't playing every night. Hartenstein had that opportunity, plus Morris and Batum and Covington could all play center, and they all will play center in Ty Lue's 11-man crazy rotation. So Hartenstein's fine as an ad, but don't be surprised when there's a lot of duds thrown in there. But his upside is probably higher than almost anyone that I've spoken about. So he becomes an interesting ad, but just don't be surprised if it blows up in your face. Someone asked about
John,
Cam Thomas.
Cam Thomas?
A lot of people asking about Cam Thomas. I don't really know why. Yes, James Harden is gone, but Seth Curry moves into James Harden's role there. So Cam Thomas wasn't even starting the last couple of games with Harden out. And Seth just takes those minutes that Harden was playing. So I don't think Cam is going, even though he's played well the last couple of games, I wouldn't bother adding him in most fantasy spots.
Keep doing that.
All right. I know we are going to throw it over to the Wizards deal in a minute here, but John, do you have anything to add before we do that?
Well, no, I was going to, as we transition over to the Wizards, I am kind of curious to see what the overall impact is here for the Washington Wizards, because, we talked a little bit before. I thought there's a good point about not having Porzingis play much, if at all, for the Wizards at this point. And if Bradley Beal is out and you bring in a guy, you give up 2 players who were playing to bring in a guy who's not playing, it seems to me that the Wizards have kind of like embraced the tank and almost in a very dollar store way are trying to do what the Warriors did last year with not, just, our stars are out. Let's just let it slide. We'll get a good draft pick. We'll try to see if one of these high draft picks can kind of help, but let's just tank and figure out when Bradley Beal gets back. Let's use this off season to just kind of build around him and let's see how that goes. And I think there's a possibility if you get a good draft pick here from all of this, and you make a couple of decent moves in the offseason and an impact player here, that could prevent Bradley Beal from leaving. I mean, the net effect here is you build something around Bradley Beal. you come back stronger after a season as a more of an aberration than we expected. We didn't expect them to be great, but this is, much, much worse than we expected from the Wizards. Maybe, possibly, that Beal comes back healthy, you get a good draft pick, you make a couple of solid moves, they come back, they actually play well together, they get a better mix together, and who knows what you do with Porzingis after that. But I think I see a path of Bradley Beal sticking around in Washington for a little bit. He's going to sign his extension. So Beal was supposed to be one of the guys that we're talking about today when this season started, and that's not happening. And we might not talk about it in the summer. The Bradley Beal trade discussion has been pushed off, I think, for at least a year and maybe beyond. And that could benefit the Washington Wizards.
All right, guys. Well, we're running up here to our end time. I know that we had some technical difficulties in the beginning, but we really appreciate you guys sticking around and joining us today. I think that it's going to be still some more things that we're going to be able to talk about throughout the next week or so, probably longer, once we really get all the details of this and how all of these players are going to be used. But John, Josh, I appreciate your guys' time. I know that I'm sure there's some more questions you guys can address for your fans and everyone after we are done here. But I just wanted to take a minute and say thank you to everyone watching. That was the Locked On NBA Trade Deadline Show. Please check out Locked On NBA on YouTube and, of course, all of your local teams' Locked On podcasts. I'm Kim Becker. Everybody, thanks so much.